New Year, everyone. This is Sonia from An Enthusiastic Reader, and I am here today to tell you my top 10 reads of 2020. All of the books that I read that made it to my top 10 are fiction. I read quite a bit of nonfiction. I enjoyed it, but none of them quite got to the level of my top 10 favorite books, and I'm going to impose an order on them, and I probably won't talk too much about the books, but I do want to read some excerpts of the writing for some of the books, and that's my plan, and that's what I'm doing, and let's go. Okay, number 10 is Homeland Elegies by Ayad Akhtar, and Akhtar is a playwright, and he has written he writes autofiction. Plays take elements from his life and then he incorporates them into his drama, and now he's done the same thing by incorporating elements of his life and his playwriting life and his plays into a novel. So there have been criticisms of this, that he could have just written a play, but I think fewer people would have been introduced to the ideas, and I think standing on its own, it's a fine novel about very serious topics and trying to capture the reality of what it's like to be Muslim, being from Pakistan, living in the United States, and trying to figure out where you belong, or if you even indeed belong anywhere. Number 9 on my list of best books is Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam, and this is a book about two families. They are, by circumstance, sequestered together in a vacation home on Long Island when the systems of order and technology are collapsing, and it's unclear why, but the owners of the vacation home are not elderly, but an late middle-aged African-American couple, and their tenants are this family of 4 that are there for their dream vacation. And so a lot of the novel is about systems, a lot of the novel is about race, class, expectations, and then watching all of your expectations devolve and dissolve as the systems are collapsing. So it's kind of a grim story, but also it's full of insight. You really care about the characters. At the beginning of the novel, it feels satirical, but then it comes into kind of a much more realistic lens by the end. Anyway, it was a very strong novel, and it works as we are trying to navigate our systems that seem to be not as strong as we would like them to be. Number 8 on my list is the children's book by A.S. Byatt. I have been wanting to read this book for many years, and it's been one of those books that had been sitting on my Kindle shelf for a long time. And I asked on Twitter, my followers on Twitter, should I read the children's book? And Hannah from Hannah's Books said, if you read it, you're going to be so happy, because it's a book you can really sink into. It's a saga, it's generational, and it's historical, and it's also full of ideas. And so I took her advice, and I was so glad that I read it, because I really got very engrossed in the lives of these characters, ideas about art and mythology and how we raise children, and can you be ambitious and have children? Are the children served well? And the children in this novel are really the core of the story. And I was so glad I read it, and it worked well for me, and I want to read more A.S. Byatt. Number 7 is a book of short stories called How to Pronounce a Knife by Suvankam Thamavangsa. And this is the story of Laotian people who are immigrants in Canada. When I talked about this in the last video that I did, I really very selfishly or stupidly assumed that it took place in the United States. I don't think it ever really said overtly, but the author is Canadian or Laotian Canadian, and I just assumed that people getting treated poorly as immigrants, it would be the United States that would be the setting, but no, instead it's Canadian. And there are very generational stories where the younger people who are more acclimated to the culture of Canada, the predominant white culture of Canada, have conflicts with their parents who came to Canada to make much better lives for their children and really had to take steps down from where they had been. But the writing was so good. Let me give you a little sample. The other night, I saw an image of the earth on the evening news. I had seen it many times before, and although my mother was not there, I spoke to her anyway as if she was. See, it really is round. Now we know for sure. I said it out loud again, and even though it disappeared, I knew what I had said had become a sound in the world. Afterwards, I went to the bathroom mirror and stared at the back of my mouth. I opened my mouth wide and saw the hot, wet, pink flesh and the dark center where my voice came out of, and I laughed loud and wild. The sound went into the air vent, and I imagined people living in the building wondering to themselves where a sound like that came from. What could make a woman laugh like that at this hour of the night? Every story worked well. You got to see a gamut of different personalities and circumstance, and just how variable their personalities and their plights and their reactions to each other were. So it's fantastic. Number 6 is Utopia Avenue by David Mitchell. I haven't seen anyone in my booktube realm that liked this book very much, or that I heard them talk about it and say they liked it, but I thought it was great. I am always a David Mitchell fan. I really loved the conceit of it being a set of characters that was set in Britain in the late 60s and the music scene. So you had a mix of real life characters and then these fictional characters. It also had the David Mitchell otherworldliness storyline that connected a few of the characters. It had throwbacks to previous novels. It was really everything I wanted in a David Mitchell novel. I loved the characterization, the humor, the plot was very propulsive, and it worked. So it made my top 10. Number 5, Lost in the City by Edward P. Jones. This is a short story collection. I'm in love with the writing of Edward P. Jones, and in this particular collection, Washington, D.C. is a very important part of the plots of all of the stories. It's basically a character unto itself as gentrification happens, and where Black citizens lived and worked within government. See the devolution of the city and crime and drugs coming in, but he is such a good writer, and I really loved it. So I only have one Edward P. Jones novel left to read, and that is All Aunt Hagar's Children, and I do plan to read that in 2021. Number 4 is the novel that's Argentinian. It's translated from the French, but it's set in Argentina. It's called Nothing But Dust by Sandrine Colette, and this is the story of a family of beef ranchers where the mother has 4 sons. She hates her sons. She hates her life. She is a terrible, mean woman. And the story is about how the sons all either do or aren't able to thrive within this bad family situation. It was so well written. I don't have my copy of the book, so I can't give you a sample of the prose, but it's very atmospheric. It's and very character driven, and it was just a wonderful book. So if you're looking for a book in translation or a woman author in translation, this would be a wonderful pick. It's a Europa edition book. Number 3, this is another book that I didn't see hardly anyone on BookTube like, but it is Writers and Lovers by Lily King. I heard someone say that they thought the writing in this book was terrible. I thought the writing in this book was fantastic. I loved this book. It's the story of a woman in her early 30s. She's been writing the same novel for 6 years, really trying to create, to build herself as a writer. In the meantime, she's a waitress. Her mother has just recently died, so it's a book about grief. It's about family resentment. Her father is not a good person. She has to grapple with what he did. She's also trying to just find romance, and she works in this restaurant where some of the people don't like her and some do, and it's all about the politics of the restaurant, and also dating, also writing. It was one of the best novels I read this year. I loved it. I would read it again, and I would like to read more Lily King. So I guess take it for what you will, but I thought the writing was really good. You just get to see this character in her everyday ups and downs and highs and lows, and just navigating through a very difficult time with humor and grace. Number 2 is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. This book has been talked about so much on BookTube. It's the story of William Shakespeare's family, of which nothing is really known, nothing is recorded, and so Maggie O'Farrell has just like imprinted a story that she thought would work to tell the story of the family, and it was beautiful. It was really full of emotion, gorgeous writing, very little about Shakespeare himself. He's not even mentioned. His name's not even mentioned as William Shakespeare. We just happen to know that. And the wild imagination of Maggie O'Farrell with this kind of framework just really worked for me. I thought it was great. I'm actually going to be reading it again in January for a book club, and I couldn't be happier. Okay, here we go. The number 1 book I read in 2020 is the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman by Ernest Gaines. This is the story that was inspired by a real-life slave, was his aunt, and she was renowned in his family, and some of her stories make it into this book. It takes place in Louisiana. It starts out before emancipation and then goes all the way up through the 70s to 80s. So it covers 100 years. She's like 106, and she's being interviewed by a historian, and he's writing a book about her, and then she just launches into her monologue and tells the entire story in her own words, and it was just glorious. It was such a good book. She is a Spitfire character, and always resilient, looking out for herself, pragmatic. And then as she's telling her story, she's telling the story of all the people she knows around her, other Black people in different circumstance. And it was so good. I don't think I can do it justice for me to read it out loud, so I don't think I'll read anything from it, but just know that she is just a singular character. You will not be able to forget about her if you read her story. And I definitely want to read more Ernest Gaines in 2021. I think I will probably read A Gathering of Old Men, which I think is set in the 70s. So Ernest Gaines wrote about different generations of Black people that he knew in the Louisiana area. So, and he was renowned. I don't know why he doesn't get more attention, but he should. And that's all I have to say about that. It's been a great year for me reading-wise. I've read 72 books. These are 10 of the best. And I will then start now watching all of your top 2020 book videos. I haven't watched any because I just wanted to have a clear head for my own video, and that's all I have to say now. I will be back very soon in another video, and thank you for watching all the way to the end. Happy New Year, and I will see you soon. Bye.